There are days that mark your life, and there are days that split it in two. For me, that day wasn't on a battlefield or in a car accident. It was in a white, sterile room that smelled of disinfectant. The doctor's words were cold and technical. Type 1 diabetes, autoimmune, daily injections, for the rest of your life. A verdict, a life sentence. But the sound of those words was nothing compared to the silence that followed. The drive home was the longest of my life. Helen, my wife, didn't say a word. She just drove, her eyes fixed on the road, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. I could feel the weight of her gaze even without her looking at me. I tried to break the ice. I said, "We'll figure it out. I'm gonna be okay." And that's when she stopped at a red light, turned to me, and executed me. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She spoke in a low voice, almost a whisper, with an honesty that burned more than any needle ever would. She said, "That's not it, Mark. It's just that everything is going to change. You're not the same anymore." She paused, searching for the right word to bury me. And then she found it. "You seem less of a man now." Less of a man? The words echoed in the silence of the car. Suddenly, diabetes wasn't a disease. It was a character flaw, a weakness, a stain on my identity. That night, for the first time, I felt like a criminal in my own home. I hid my insulin pen at the bottom of a drawer as if it were something dirty. I checked my glucose in the dark of the bathroom so she wouldn't see. The doctor gave me a diagnosis, but it was my wife who gave me the real sentence. I didn't know it yet, but that day wasn't the beginning of my disease. It was the beginning of my war, and my first enemy was sleeping next to me in bed. After the verdict came the Cold War. Helen never used the words "less of a man" again. She didn't have to. She'd found much more creative ways to remind me of it every day. The kitchen became her battlefield. I weighed my chicken, counted my carbs. My food was a map of discipline and control. It was the one thing I could master. And she brought the chaos. Every Friday, she'd come home with a pizza. The smell of cheese and pepperoni filling the house was torture. She'd open the box right in front of me and say, with an innocent smile, "Oh, sorry, honey, I know you can't have any, but I can't put my life on hold, right? Have a little piece, it won't kill you." But she knew it would. Every slice was a nail in my coffin, and she offered it to me with a smile. Her poison wasn't just in the food. It was in the concern. At dinner parties with friends, when I turned down dessert, she'd announce to the whole table, "Oh, don't mind him, guys. Mark just has to control himself, the poor thing. His health is fragile." And everyone would look at me with pity, the same pity you feel for a child or a wounded animal. I felt my face burn. In that moment, I wasn't a man fighting a battle. I was my wife's poor, fragile little thing. Every attempt I made to fight was ridiculed. If I went for a walk, she'd laugh. "Wow, a sudden athlete now?" If I checked my glucose, she'd sigh impatiently, as if the sound of the device was a personal insult. She wasn't supporting me, she was policing me. And with every test, every restricted meal, every walk, I felt like I was failing some secret test she had created. Our bed grew bigger. The space between us turned to ice. How could she desire a man who needed to be watched like a child to keep him from eating a cookie? The worst moment came on a random night. I saw her on the couch, eating a pint of ice cream, watching TV. She looked at me, spoon in her mouth, and there was no malice in her gaze. There was something much worse. Indifference. A profound boredom. That's when I understood. She wasn't rooting against me. She wasn't even in the game anymore. She was just waiting for me to give up. I spent weeks, maybe months, in that limbo. A ghost in my own home. I did what I had to do. Checked my levels, injected my insulin, ate my meals. An automaton. I had accepted my sentence. The boredom in Helen's eyes was my daily landscape. Her indifference was the air I breathed. I thought that was rock bottom. I was wrong. Rock bottom has a trap door. I came home early one day. The house was silent. I could hear her in the bedroom, her muffled voice talking on the phone. I was about to go in when I heard my name, and I stopped, froze. She was talking to her mother. Her voice was different, light. The voice she used before everything changed. And the words were knives of ice. "No, Mom, he's not getting better. I mean, the disease is controlled, but he isn't. It's like living with a stranger, a fragile stranger. I miss having a real partner, you know? Someone who can keep up with me. I didn't marry a sick man. I didn't marry a sick man. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I felt nothing. An absolute void. It was the sound of a door closing forever. In that moment, I understood with a clarity that split my soul in two. The man she loved was dead, and she was just waiting for the body to get cold enough to bury it. I backed away silently. She never knew I heard. I went into the living room, sat in the dark, and for the first time, I saw myself the way she saw me. Pathetic. A man whose entire identity had been hijacked by a disease. I turned on the TV. No sound. Images scrolled by, but I saw nothing. Until it stopped on one scene. The city marathon. Faces contorted in pain, bodies soaked in sweat, at the absolute limit of exhaustion. But their eyes shone with a fire I thought had been extinguished in me forever. They weren't fragile. They were made of steel. They weren't running from anything. They were running toward something. In that instant, in the dark of my living room, a decision formed inside me. It wasn't a New Year's resolution, it was a vow, a silent oath. Helen didn't marry a sick man. Fine. I would give her something much worse. I would transform myself into a monster of discipline and endurance. I would take the disease she used to diminish me and turn it into my fuel. I wasn't going to just survive anymore. I was going to dominate. She didn't know it yet, but that night, the fragile man she refused to live with had just signed up to run 26.2 miles. The first run was a joke. I didn't even make it a mile before my lungs started to burn and my legs turned to jelly. I stopped, doubled over, gasping, and the only thing I could hear was Helen's voice in my head, laughing. A sudden athlete now? In that moment, I almost gave up. Almost. My new life began at 4:30 in the morning. The sound of the alarm was my call to battle. The world was still dark, cold, silent. It was my sanctuary. The first thing I did wasn't to get coffee. It was to prick my finger. The number on the little device decided everything. What I would eat, how much insulin I would take, the intensity of my workout. Diabetes was no longer my weakness. It had become my science, my strategy. Helen watched it all from a distance with a mix of contempt and irritation. "You're going to kill yourself with this obsession," she'd say as I weighed my oatmeal. "No one normal does this." And she was right. The man she knew wouldn't. That man was dead. In his place, there was a machine of discipline. The real hell wasn't the exhaustion. It was the balance. Running 7 miles and feeling the cold sweat of hypoglycemia starting to take over your body, the panic rising in your throat when you're still 3 miles from home. It was having to stop, sit on a dirty curb, and swallow a carb gel with shaking hands, praying the sugar would hit your bloodstream before you passed out. It was the humiliation of being fragile at the exact moment you were trying to be strong. But something began to change. The grinding pain in my muscles on the treadmill. It was a pain I chose, and it was infinitely better than the pain of being belittled in my own home. The insulin needles were no longer a symbol of my disease. They were the tools that allowed me to go further. I turned her voice into my fuel. Every time my legs screamed to stop, I heard the echo of her words, "Less of a man." And I took another stride. Fragile. Another. Sick. Another. Months passed at this pace. Darkness. Pain. Numbers. Sweat. Silence. Helen and I became two strangers sharing a house. She didn't ask about my workouts, and I didn't offer any information. I no longer needed the anger. I no longer needed her. The man she tried to bury with words had died a long time ago. In his place, there was only a machine, forged in fire and discipline, counting down the days to the starting line.
Marathon Day dawned cold and gray. There were thousands of people at the starting line, a mass of nervous, adrenaline-fueled bodies. I felt nothing. For me, it wasn't a race. It was an execution, my own. Helen wasn't there. I didn't expect her to be. I told her I was going for a long run, and she just shrugged. In the last few months, I had become little more than part of the furniture to her. The first 20 miles were mechanical. Left, right, breathe. I pricked my finger at mile 9, adjusted my insulin, drank water, stable glucose. I wasn't a man running. I was a perfectly functioning system. The pain hit at mile 22, the famous wall. My legs were blocks of lead, my body screaming for help, and for the first time in months, I smiled. It was a familiar pain, a pain I knew, a pain I controlled. I didn't think of Helen. I didn't think of revenge. I thought of the sound of the alarm at 4:30 in the morning. I thought of the metallic taste of blood in my mouth during training. I thought of every needle, every drop of sweat. I was no longer running against the man she saw. I was honoring the man I had forged in the dark. I only saw her at mile 25. almost at the finish line. She was there in the crowd, next to her parents. I don't know why they came. Maybe curiosity. Maybe they had seen on the local news that the race would pass by there. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second, and in that instant, time stopped. She wasn't looking at a sick man. She wasn't seeing a fragile man. The man who crossed in front of her was lean, hard as steel, his face an impenetrable mask of determination. I wasn't her husband. I was a stranger, an athlete, a survivor. And on her face, I didn't see anger. I didn't see pride. I saw confusion. The look of someone who realizes too late that they threw away a diamond thinking it was a piece of glass. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I didn't change my pace. I just looked straight through her and kept running. I crossed the finish line. The TV cameras were there. Someone put a medal around my neck. I didn't feel euphoria. I felt silence, the peace of a war that had ended. That night, I came home. The medal was on the kitchen table. Helen was sitting on the couch in the same position as that night, months ago. The TV was on, showing the local news report about the marathon. And there I was. She looked at me when I walked in. The confusion in her eyes had turned into something more. Fear? Respect? It no longer mattered. The only thing she said was, "I saw you on TV." I just nodded. I grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge and went to the bedroom. The door closed behind me. The silence that settled in the house was no longer the silence of her indifference. It was the silence of my power.